y'all, welcome back. My name is Deborah. I want to talk to you about what I actually read in October. I had filmed a video about a month ago talking about what I wanted to read, and now I want to talk about what I've read and my thoughts on these books. So the first book that I read in October, I finished reading Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. It was the Pavir and Volokonsky. I knew if I stopped and slowed down, I'd get it right. They were the translators. It's a more modern translation. They have done a lot of really nice translations of Russian classics. And that was the one that was in the new Penguin cloth bound. I had checked that one out from the library, so I don't have it to show you, and I was not able to annotate it because it didn't belong to me. I'm sure the library would not appreciate my annotating their newest copy of Anna Karenina. But I was excited because my eyes got to be the first one to see all the words. So it starts with this great line. The first line of this novel is, "All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." And then the story unravels, and you find you get into these families that are in their own very weird ways happy and unhappy. So it kind of unravels his argument a little bit, or although maybe there just are no completely happy families out there. So it's a very, very long story. It starts with the Orlovskys. They're of an unhappy family. Their marriage is disintegrating, and the husband is just kind of a party boy, kind of oblivious to leaving his wife at home with these 4 or 5 kids and spending all of her money out partying every night with the guys. And so there's just a whole lot of it starts with that they love each other, but there's some bad choices going on, and then you get introduced to these other characters. Now, Anna Karenina is one of the characters that comes in, and the story is not exclusively, even though she's a title character, it's not exclusively about her. Although you kind of have these two characters, Levin and Anna, and in some ways they parallel each other, but one of them starts out miserable and gets happier, and one starts happy and gets miserable. So there's a lot of there's a lot of comparison. Some of the end, I wrote notes on my book. So my first note on this at the end of the book was, Tolstoy uses lots of words, all the words. It's very long. There are some sections that I know he's talking about this for a reason, but for the life of me, I can't find how you divide haystacks up has anything to do with anything. So if you're not prepared to sort through each and every word, it's a very long book. I'm definitely going to have to reread this novel at some point. I generally found, one of the interesting things was that I generally found Anna unlikable. I really did not like her. She turned out to be, she's kind of touted as this beautiful, upstanding, just lovely creature, but she's selfish and manipulative, and she cheats on her husband, and she runs off with him and has a child with somebody else. And just by the time you're just kind of over her, and then you begin to see her descent into madness. She goes from being manipulative to being jealous and paranoid and delusional, until right at the very end you think, she's really sick. And you end up I ended up feeling sorry for her, but not liking her as a character, she would not be a person I would want to spend any time with at all. I wrote here, I just wanted her to act like a grown woman. Stop acting like a teenage girl and act like a grown woman. So those are kind of some of the things that that I thought about as I read this novel. I will definitely go back and read it again. I will get my own copy and will annotate it. I think that one of my disadvantages in reading this work is that some of the events and philosophical discussions that are going on between characters in the novel, I didn't understand because I don't have the background in 19th century Russian history to understand what the dissolution of the relationship between nobility and serfs did politically. I don't know enough about, I don't have that background. So I may have to do a deep read where I'm diving into reading it in little tiny bits and then go finding other information to help me to better understand what Tolstoy was talking about. So I think it's definitely worth time to read. It's definitely not a first classic to read, not unless you're prepared to do some homework for it. All right, the second book that I read was a nonfiction. That was this one by Susan Cain, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And this was like the first book I tried to annotate, and I didn't have any stickies, any tabs, so I used big sticky notes. I really liked this book. She starts out with this shift in the early 20th century with a moving from admiring people based on character to admiring people based on personality. She calls it the culture of personality, which focuses on, puts more value on extroversion than virtue, pretty much. It gave me a lot of things to think about. I'm just going to share a couple of quotes from here. Because we think about introversion as being shyness, but they're very different. She says, shyness is a fear of social disapproval or humiliation, while introversion is a preference for environments that are not overstimulating. Shyness is inherently painful, and introversion is not. So I thought that was very, very interesting. She talked a little bit, had a chapter on charismatic leadership, and even talked about introverts in religion, and especially within evangelical Christianity. And one of the quotes that she put in here was from someone that she had interviewed, and she said, "There's a place in God's kingdom for sensitive, reflective types. It's not easy to claim, but it's there." And so she had also referenced another book that I intend on following up on and reading. So just a lot of different things, some things that I made me think about some of my students and how I approach talking to some of my students. There are different ways that we educate nurses, and we use simulation labs pretty often. That gives us gives students an opportunity to practice interactions with patients who, without the danger of harming someone. It lets you have a do-over and lets us have teaching moments where I can step in and say, okay, let's talk about why you're doing what you're doing, and let's talk about the better ways to approach this, or let's have a moment, explain to me why you did that. Yep, you are right on with what you ought to do. Tell me why you're making these choices. So those kinds of situations, however, as a student, I hate being in those situations because it feels like performance art, and I really hate it. But we know it's beneficial. But now I need to think about, okay, how can I best make that experience productive for my students who are introverts and who find the situation itself uncomfortable. And so yeah, very good book, very excellent book. I would recommend reading that one. All right, so after that one, I read Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. And then I read these two together. I read Heart of Darkness, and then I read Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. So Heart of Darkness was written in at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. It was written by Joseph Conrad, who was an immigrant to England. He also served as, let me back up. So this story is told from it's a tale within a tale. So it starts, this whole book is somebody else telling his experience going down this river in Africa that we all kind of, it's not said that it's the Congo, but it fits the time, the events of the time, the location, the descriptions would be in going through the Belgian Congo. And Marlowe tells his tale about going down the river, and his job is to retrieve this person named Kurtz, who is at the very end of the river. Not a fan. Not a fan. There is, and Heart of Darkness is supposedly one of these classics of English literature. I did not enjoy the experience of reading it, much less, I mean, the way that Conrad depicts the indigenous people, the African people, even looking at it through the lens of he's writing from his own time, the people became more part of the scenery. They weren't actually, none of the Africans have their own voice. They are more part of the scenery. They're not really presented as worth exploring, telling their story. And that disturbed me. But even through the lens of, okay, this is colonial England, and he was actually, his book, what's sad is it actually challenged the way that the natives had been treated, which was kind of weird because he didn't do much better. Stylistically, I didn't like the book. There were paragraphs that went on for pages, and if I didn't understand something, I couldn't figure out where I needed to go back to catch up on it. It kind of wandered in places. It probably could have been about a 15-page short story if you really wanted to be truthful about it. Did not like, probably will not read again. Probably should read again, but not likely. I don't plan on spending my heartbeats that way. All right, as I even wrote in here, I don't even think I'll keep this book. So there you go. This one may go down to the Goodwill or to the library. All right, so in response to reading about the colonizers, I read a book from the perspective of Nigerians at the time of colonization. So this was the book Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. He was from Nigeria, and his book was very readable. It was written 50 years later, so the English is much better as far as stylistically in mind with what's going on. It really is about this clash between traditional and modern culture, because the protagonist, Okonkwo, is a traditional man in a Nigerian village. And it talks about how things change in the village as European cultures begin to interact, as missionaries come, and you start seeing these divisions in families, in communities. And it is really a nice story. I really didn't, the main character really isn't likable, but it's not about liking him. It's about seeing the journey and the changes in the village and the culture through his eyes. So I found it has a very sad ending. I won't give you any spoilers. But I found it sad at the end. I found both of these sad, but for different reasons. But definitely worth reading. If you have not read any African literature, this is a great place to start. So there you go. There's that one. Okay, so moving right along. Willa Cather, Death Comes for the Archbishop. I loved this book. The title would make you think it would be a murder story. Death Comes from the Archbishop. It sounds like something Agatha Christie would write. But it really, I had written in here, a better title would be The Adventures of Bishop Latour and Father Vaillant. Because it really is about this friendship between these two men, a newly appointed bishop to the newly constructed Diocese of New Mexico, and a priest who came to assist him. And it's about their friendship and how they worked. And they were very, in comparison to this one, these were very honorable men. They were respectful of the cultures that they encountered in the American Southwest. It's just a very nice. It's not plot driven. It's a character story. It's almost like short stories, a series of short stories with the same characters. There is this great quote that I had to put a sticky note by. It says, "Where there is a great love, there are always miracles," and I just thought that was very. I had to put a little pink sticky tab by that one. So, very, very good book. I would read that one again, definitely. I did read an additional book my husband checked out called called Florida Man by Tom Cooper. It was just, I would read it again. It had to go back to the library. Then I started reading, because I was trying to put off reading my scary books till the end of October. So I started out with Henry James, Turn of the Screw. This was not on my list to read for October, but I was plundering around at Second and Charles, and it was $3, so I grabbed it. I'm so glad I did. This is a long short story / short novella. It is about 115 pages in this book. It's just like this section of the book. It is a Gothic story, mysterious castle, isolation, governess, hauntings, and I got to the end of it, and it just like, you get to the end of it, and I literally wrote here, yikes. It was because I got to the end of it, and I was like, wait, what just happened? Very nice story. Very good story. Totally worth reading. Only about 100 pages. If you haven't read it, this is a Halloween read. All right, then I read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I loved this book. If you have not, in fact, I'm going to do a video just on this book because I have so much to kind of unpack with this book for you. It is absolutely nothing like Hollywood's monster films. Absolutely nothing. The Frankenstein's creature, and I really can't, after I read the book, I really can't call him the monster, because who the monster is part of the discussion about who is the more monstrous character in the book. Totally worth reading. It does get long. It is kind of epistolary, or starts out epistolary in nature. Starts out with a series of letters, and then once again, it seems to be a trend with this, with 19th century books being a story within a story. So you start out with a series of letters, or someone introduces a story and tells the story, instead of just kind of like hearing it from the main characters themselves. You're hearing someone else tell their story in a way that's not an omniscient third-person narrator. It's another character telling someone else's story. So I will do another video on this book by itself, but Loved, loved it. And Mary Shelley was only 18 years old when she wrote this, and it took a very long time before people believed that she wrote it and not her husband, the poet Percy Shelley. That's part of the other video. All right, to end October, since I still had time in October, I read Dracula. Okay. Loved this one too. This one was such a quick read. I did not annotate this one because I was so involved in the story that it was interrupting my mind to actually stop and talk about it. So I did not annotate it. I probably will the next time I go through it. My son is reading Dracula as well. And I can't wait to sit down and talk with him about it, because he actually pulled up his copy, and he was like, well, look, Mom, here's the part where this action starts to happen, and the main character, you can actually see his panic, because he says there's the word I occurs 25 times in this first paragraph, and I'm like, whoa, yeah, that's right, he was kind of having a moment there, wasn't he? This is also an epistolary novel. It's a series of letters and journal entries that kind of document the entire story. So at the beginning, you get journal entries from a young attorney who goes to Transylvania to Count Dracula's castle, and he's conducting some business. The Count has bought a house in England, and he's bringing all the paperwork, and he realizes that something is wrong, that this guy is weird, and sees him crawling out the window face down, going down the side of the castle like a lizard one night. He has realized he's locked into the castle. It's very interesting. And it shifts. Once you think he's dead, action shifts to another place. It's really interesting because one of the complaints about Dracula, about Bram Stoker's version of Dracula, is that he uses a lot of dialect, but Stoker was originally a playwright. He was not a very good playwright, but language and the ability to use language to tell stories was very important. That's where his mind went. So the nuances of dialogue in here are very interesting, especially when you realize that he's not a poet, he's a playwright writing a novel, and that gives it a different perspective. So it does very much read like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 when you read the book. Loved it. The pacing was really good. It starts out more slowly, but has like cliffhanger points at it, when all of a sudden there will be a cliffhanger, and this, next scene starts. Very, very interesting, very quick read. I will read it again and probably read it more carefully and annotate. This was just strictly, absolutely reading it for fun, and what fun it was. So that is what I have read in the month of October. Let me know down below if you're interested in this kind of content, or what you've been reading, because I'm always looking for new things to read. There is a video coming up, just came out, with talking about what I want to read in the month of November. And otherwise, I will see you guys when I finish this video. All right, talk to you later. Bye.